Hey everyone, it's Austin Solomon, the Solomon Group at Coldwell Banker. Welcome to this week's episode of the Real Wausau Real Estate Show. Today I'm joined by Kurt Moeller. Kurt is a local assessor for Marathon County, Clark County, Shawano, and Wood. 18 municipalities now.
That's right. Yeah, it's been a slow transition taking over my father's practice years ago and expanding a little bit and keeping up to date with all the new regulations from the state and software changing and everything else.
Kurt, you've been busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
well, thanks for joining us on this week's episode of The Real. This is going to be a lot of value for people that are listening. I know I get so many questions from people about assessed values versus market values versus appraised values. So thanks for joining us on this week's episode. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, what you do, and what an assessor does. Yeah.
Sure. No problem. Basically what an assessor does for any municipality is our job is to go out and look at each piece of property and it's three things. Yep. Number one, we discover what's there, what's on this piece of land. Number two, we want to list out, like, is there a building there? How many buildings? What type of land might be there? And then lastly, we want to put a value to that. And so ideally in any municipality or in some municipalities, maybe a specific neighborhood, we want to be very uniform and consistent with how we're putting a value on any type of building or land that might be there or whatever classification of land might be there. So really the key is that it comes down to three things. We discover, we list, we value. And then we just work hard to study the sales, study the market, and try to really be consistent in what we're doing there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then from there, what happens? So you submit, what's there at the property, the value of the property.
Sure.
Where does that go? And then how does the municipality then translate that to taxes?
Sure. Well, basically it's any assessment, it's an annual process for every municipality in the state.
Yep.
We go through and we have to have, on the first of the year, we want to discover what we have, what new sales happen in the town. You may stop by every single sale like I do. Some places they send out letters if they can't get a hold of homeowners, just to try and learn about what happened in the last calendar year of sales. And then also we want to capture on the first of the year, what's new? What changed in the town? What new construction do we have? Did we have an old garage or old barn that fell down? Do we have a house or that moved out of the municipality or into it? So we want to really capture what happens there and record all that information. After that, and that's usually around the first. Some assessors work through the fall, some work during the spring, some do a combination of both, like myself. I'll go through in the summer, I'll make a run through in the fall, and then I'll make another pass through in early January just to see how things finalized, if a house is being built and how far along it is. But after that's all put together and I have my notes and I feel good about that, the county, for each county, will send me what splits happened. If you had a 40-acre parcel and it's split into two pieces, well, we want to reclassify that as, two new property pieces and get that accurately done. What acres are there? Split the assessment up or combine them. After that, I will update the entire town roll from top to bottom, not changing everyone's assessment, but really trying to capture the changes that happened in that year, accurately put them onto the roll, and then I will send that off to the county. We have a 45-day window in order to post roll update to get the rolls out to the municipality and then have our open book board review meetings. Now, open book can be had at almost any time, but it has to be a certain amount of days before your board of review. Board review has to happen typically on the fourth Monday of April for that and the following 45 days after. Once your board review is completed, then basically we send in final reports to the state. At that point, your assessment is locked for the year, barring an error somewhere along the lines with software or anything else. It's locked for the year. So your assessment that you receive in December is already done at your board review. It's locked. How did your property look on the first of the year? We had all the updates, the reviews. We had open book for anyone to ask questions. We had our board review. Everything is locked. Final report sent. And then later in that year, when it hits December, all of your local schools, they will have their budget. They'll figure out whatever their budget is for the year. The technical colleges will do the same. Your local municipality will set their budget. And once those budgets are all set, they go, okay, here is what we need from our local town people. They'll look at all the local assessments and they will split that up. And they'll figure out what the tax burden is. Because really, your local assessment, what you have is your local value. That is your percent burden of what the taxes are in that area. And so basically we're just kind of splitting up the tab a little bit. Like, everyone participated in one of these roads here and everyone lives in this town. Like, how do we split the tab up? Well, so-and-so's got a $100,000 property and the neighbor has a $200,000 property. So one person probably should get a little more of the burden than the next, and it kind of goes straight down the line just like that. Yeah. But that's basically how you go from January 1st, where I'm discovering and understanding what's changed, updating the role, having these open book meetings to ask questions, locking it at board review, and then all the budgets get set through the year, and at the end of the year you receive something in the mail that you have to pay.
Yeah, right.
Everyone's excited about.
Right. No, that's super interesting. So, couple things there. So when the new assessment comes out, because you typically get that at the end of the year or the beginning of the year.
Well, a new assessment, say for instance that you have a property and you just built a new detached garage.
Yep.
And you built it in the prior calendar year. So it was there. You built it in 2021. And so this year I'm coming around now, or I come around in January, I say, okay, I see it. It was there on January 1st, 2022.
Yep.
So for the 2022 calendar year, I'll be recording that, adding that to the roll at that time. And then I will send you a notice in the mail before we even have open book. So that way you see it and go, my assessment's changing. There will be a note on there. It might say, for me, I handwrite them. I'll say new garage or whatever the change might be, or barn down. And then I'll send it to you. It'll have my phone number on. It'll have the clerk's phone number on.
Yep.
It'll have the open book meeting dates, the board review meeting dates. So typically the first step, if you have a question, obviously is to call. Or if you don't have time, you want to come into open book and just look at the roll, look at the town roll, see how everyone looks. You can come and do that too. If for some reason we wouldn't agree on the value, you could file an objection at the board review. You have to do that 48 hours before before the board review meeting, filing it with the clerk of that municipality, and then you would be given an appointment at board review that you could object, and you would bring in evidence of saying, okay, we know what the assessment is, and I would show my assessment card to the board, and then you would say, here's my evidence that it is worth something different.
Sure.
Based on this, and then they would make a ruling based on that.
Sure.
But that's basically how it would work. Whatever is captured in the prior calendar year, I would add that to the town roll, and then it would come through to get a notice well before the open book or board review, and then it would go on for that December. That would be added, so your assessment would change based on your changes. Ideally, everything is built on January 15th for you,
right?
And then it'd say, hey, it wasn't here on the 1st, and away we would go. So then you'd almost get a year. I had a call the other day from one of the realtors asking information on a house in the town of Wausau, saying, do you have any of the house information on the specific lot that got split last year? I go, no. And she goes, well, the house is selling soon. And I go, well, they're going to have a very low tax bill this year because I have nothing captured, because nothing was there on the 1st. But it will increase.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was going to ask too.
Sure.
So with new constructions, that makes sense, because this happens a lot where a house might be a new construction home that's being built over the course of the winter. It might have a partial assessment, because when you go there January 1,
yes,
and it's just the concrete foundations
yes.
poured and it's framed and with a roof.
Yes.
And you're at that moment, you're going to have to come up with a
value.
A value.
That's
yeah.
correct. Yeah, it's there's general rules of thumb that assessors use, and obviously, like I said before, the biggest thing is that you're uniform and how you roll that out. But with homes specifically, we try and capture like a percent done. There's like a little kind of checklist that we've used over the years, and the Wisconsin State Assessment Manual has updated different things through the years. So we'll kind of have an idea of like, hey, okay, basement poured, or basement capped, or open stud, or electrical roughed in, or siding on, all the way up until we get down to kitchen cabinet knobs and flooring finalized and trim finalized. Now, I will definitely follow you along as you build your house to make sure I'm following your progress, because you never know what might happen. You might have a person that starts to build and life changes, and they go, hey, I didn't get any progress on it this year. I've got it enclosed, but the interior's not done. We're not living in it yet. That's fine. I'll follow and stop in every year and keep the lines of communication open. It gets tricky sometimes when you get down to the final 5 or 10%, and they go, we don't have, the final piece of trim in this one room. I go, you've been living there for 5 years. It's it's time to call it.
Exactly.
A little bit, but homes will definitely follow with a percent done as you make progress on. One of the big step being you get occupants and you're living there. When it comes to other buildings, like just another detached garage or something, once you have a roof on, it's kind of done for the most part. You may not want to follow that with how far everything along is with that. You just want to follow condition. You may want to follow up if there's an interior finish, like it turns into a shop versus a cold storage building, or as the building changes a little bit. But that's exactly right. How it looks on the first from a percent done standpoint is definitely something an assessor would be interested in.
Okay. One other question I had too was that, so the review board meeting with the municipality, are you present at those if someone's disputing it?
Yes,
okay.
I am present at all open books in all board of review meetings.
Board of review, okay.
Yes,
yeah.
And at the board of review meeting, we've had plenty of time before where I've informed anyone that's changing. I've received phone calls from people that had questions. And just as a quick side note, the open book is usually one in some towns. Maybe you have 2 a year. Usually it's 1 day a year where you have, a 2-hour meeting. But most assessors, myself included, consider, if you call me anytime during the year and you have a question, an open book like question, that's fine. I can handle things just the same as I can as if you come in person. But at the board of review meeting, everyone's had a chance to review. Here are the changes. At the board of review, I will read out to the town board every change I made in the town, as well as all the new sales we had, to kind of give them an idea of like, hey, here's what things are selling for in town. The ratios of assessed to sales are changing up or down.
Yep.
And then at the end of the meeting, I will sign the town roll saying this is accurate as far as I know. And everyone else, the clerk and everyone else had a chance to see it and review it, and it's accurate as far as they know. And at that point, we consider it official.
Sure.
For that year.
Makes sense. Would so if a homeowner's looking to dispute it, because I've had it where one of the downsides of some properties is that the taxes are high.
Yes.
And I have had it in some instances where you have a very high assessment and we're selling it for under assessed value, right?
Yes.
And one of the reasons it's not selling is because of the high tax amount.
Sure.
And in that case, the homeowner may try to lower their taxes. Would that be substantial evidence if someone said, hey, my house has been on the market for 6 months at, $350,000 and it's not selling, you have it assessed at $400.
Sure.
Would that be something that would be considered?
No, that's a good question. I would definitely take that phone call and want to learn more about it. If it's someone that just did it for sale by owner, and they just put a sign at the end of the yard with their phone number, it's like, okay, 6 months, what is the market doing? Right now, obviously, we're in a boom market. We're in the craziest boom market we've seen in a long time. And things are selling in some cases darn near double assessments in some areas and some properties. But in a case, we've had it where, hey, I'm asking this and you have it assessed at this. Over a 6 month period, I would ask questions like, are you selling it yourself? Are you Did you hire a professional realtor to do it? Is it listed on multiple listing service? Where are you advertising? Just to learn more about the process. How open is it to the general public?
Yep.
Because the farther you get it out to all potential target market buyers, the better idea you have of what the value of the house is right now. Now, if they had a lot or a building or something listed now for a year or 2 years, and they go, we've lowered the price so much every year, I would say, okay, in that case, you've shown me evidence. And I've had cases, subdivisions that have wouldn't sell, and then they sold like hotcakes leading up to 2008. And then the market crashed in 2008, and people that paid a lot for lots next door, they couldn't resell these lots again. And now it's 2012, 2016. And they go, we've been selling it. Here is the realtor we've been listing with, or maybe multiple realtors, whatever it might be. And here's the prices we've moved to over time. And I go, okay, well, number one, I want to make sure I'm being accurate in the neighborhood, and not lowering one lot, but not the neighbors.
Yep.
And so, to reassess everyone, I really got to do exactly do a revaluation. But if I have like a strange lot that is just an oddball, and it's not selling well, or a building it's not selling well, and I've got good ample evidence of being listed out there, I would definitely consider that for a potential price adjustment if it makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about how do you this is super interesting too. Tell us about, is it more formula based as far as, because I've seen the assessor cards, just for the audience, we work actually pretty close with the assessors in that when we list a property for sale, we either give you a call and say, hey, Kurt, can you send me the assessor card for 123 Main Street? So that we can get the accurate information on square footage, year built, certain. And then a lot of times we rely on that data so that when we're marketing the home, we have something to go off of.
Sure.
It's interesting because a lot of times, we'll call, and I'm sure you've had this, is like, oh, what about the finished basement?
Yes.
How many square feet in the basement? Oh, I don't have any square feet in the basement. And then
Correct.
In my head, I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to be the one to tell them. I'm not going to be the one to I'll be like, I'll have to measure that out. But I'm sure you, and that's a common thing. Like people make improvements to the property. They don't always call out the assessor.
Right.
And they don't have to in some instances.
Correct. And every municipality is different.
Yeah.
If you live in the city of Wausau or you live in the town of Wausau, you may have completely different requirements for what you might have to do. And I have towns that have a very strict permitting process if they would, update their basement or something. And I've got some out in the country that are completely on zone where I have to go and find everything, and which is interesting at times. But an example like that, where I discover a finished basement, and it's not necessarily always from an appraiser or from a realtor. Sometimes I stop at every sale, and there's obviously MLS is wide open in public, and so you kind of get an idea of if I have a sale from the state says, hey, this sold, it's 3,000 square feet, and I look at, I've only got 2,000 square feet, so there's probably a partial finished basement. Yep. At that point, you follow up and you'll ask the owner, the buyer, the seller, and kind of find out a little bit about that. Occasionally, we get calls from neighbors that don't want to be quoted saying, hey, make sure you check out so-and-so's thing over there. But, so you get tips from all over once in a while to discover it. But it's not necessarily required in every municipality that you have a permit to do everything. And you never know how far along something is before you might need something. But over time, if I discover something like, a partially finished basement or central air added or a rear deck, it doesn't add as much, but I want to make sure I'm being fair to everyone and capturing that and putting on the card and making an update to that. And these days, the sale price typically tells you that, hey, there's probably something I'm missing here. And so then at that point, I go on, I'll rephotograph, try and interact with the buyer or seller, whoever I can get in contact with, to learn about the sale, see if it's an arm's length sale or if it's a family, pass down or something like that too, to content reports. But then also, see, has anything changed since I've been here last?
Yep. So let's do an example. So a home buyer, let's say a property is assessed at, I have a home for sale, it's assessed at $150,000 and the taxes are $3,000,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And we have it listed for sale for $250 because that's a good market value.
Sure.
Right? And the buyer says, Austin, they got it assessed at $150. Why would I pay $250?
Yes.
And then I explained to them typically something along the lines of, well, things are selling for over the assessed value. A lot of times the assessed values aren't updated. You know, the last time an assessor was in the property or really looked specifically at this property might have been a very long time ago, right? It doesn't
Correct.
reflect the market value of the property.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I tell that to the buyer, and they're like, okay, that makes sense, and they buy it for $250. Okay, what happened? They might be thinking, okay, what's the tax bill going to be
Sure.
in 2022? Is it going to be reassessed?
Right.
So speak into that a little bit.
No, that's a great question. Especially from people that move here from out of state. I'll stop in and say, hello, I'm your local assessor, and I saw the sale. Did everything go to the sale? Kind of learn about how's the house is in good condition. Everything as advertised and anything missing. And sometimes I'll pull in, I already kind of got a note that there's probably like, a little finished basement or the original sun porch maybe is living area now or something.
Sure.
Before I come in, because I have the card and I kind of try and take a peek before I pull in. But a number of people ask me, go, okay, so I paid $250 for this property. Is this now my assessment? Is this what you're assessing? And I'll go, no, I don't chase sales.
Yep.
You should not chase sales as an assessor. It's you'll throw things out of your uniformity, because if you have a neighbor right next door that in 1981 they both built the same house, but in 2021 one sold for $250 and the neighbor next door never sold, it would violate the consistency to say I'm going to move one and not the other.
Yep.
What I am looking to capture is if I have something missing, like a little finished basement that wasn't there or central air or something, okay, I'll add that on and I'll make a change and then send out the proper notice. But what I tell the buyers is this: I am just capturing data, because all of the sales in this town over time will tell me a story of what I eventually should be revaluing the entire town at.
Yep.
And so if houses in this neighborhood on your street or quarter are selling for $250 because they're 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square feet, then that's maybe what this neighborhood should be valued at. So you want to work that in and blend that together, because that does change over time, up and down in some markets, over the long run typically up, but no, we definitely, it's an aim not to chase sales. I definitely, there's buyers concerned. I aim to calm them and say, no, you'll have some that just say, I really want this property. It's close to my work. And so I know it's not worth this, potentially to someone else, but I wanted to pay it. But you don't get penalized in 1 year based on that. It's over time when you take kind of all boats rise or fall based on your neighborhoods and characteristics.
So for that person, what would what would happen? They bought it in 2021, 2022. Now, is there a difference between like a full reassessment? Because sometimes you might get a letter in the mail.
Sure.
That says, hey, we're doing reassessments.
Yes.
That's different than maybe the automated yearly adjustment.
Yes, absolutely.
So what would likely happen with that person? The assessed value is $150. They bought it in 2021. When do they get that notice in the mail saying, hey, here's your new assessment?
Sure. If there would be something missing, only in the case unless they bought it and then go, hey, FYI, I'm doing a reevaluation on the entire town next year, that off the table. If I stopped by and said, hey, I didn't have your sun porch that was on the back, and so I'm adding that. I would send them the notice. If I caught that now, I would note that on the card, and then in the spring, I would send them a notice saying, hey, I'm adding a sun porch, whatever value that adds. It wouldn't be $100,000 sun porch typically. It would, it would be whatever I am valuing sun porches at. Based on the last revaluation.
Yep.
And then that would get added, and I would send that to them ahead of time so they could look at it, ask me questions if they had them, and then object if they felt the need, and then move forward and make that official in the following year.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were just to spitball, what would that reassessment what would it be, do you think? It's tough to say. Let's say the assessment was $150, they bought it for $250. Let's say they did have a new sun porch.
Sure. A small sun porch, it might be depending on the size, it might be a $5,000 increase
Sure.
or something. I mean, it depends on the size. It comes down to square footage and what we're valuing enclosed porches at.
Yep.
But it would be a small piece of everything else. And that's a question. That's a great question. If you get your reassessment notice based on a small sun porch or a finished basement, call your assessor.
Yeah.
Ask them. Say,
Yep.
hey, I noticed this changed. Was this not on before, or how come it went up this amount? And what did you specifically value? Was I missing anything else, or was your card missing something else? How did you come up with the value of you moved my assessment up $9,000? And now, in the case of $100,000 over the price, there's not a ton to argue about, and there'd be almost nothing you could object to at a board of review because based on evidence. But yeah, a small sun porch, it would be a small amount. It really comes down to that square footage. If it's a heated living area, once again, it depends on the type of house. If it's on a first floor, it could be more, but square footage really drives that more than anything. Because it's not like a flat scale where I say, hey, a house that has a first floor, it's $25 per square foot for all first floors in the town of Easton or the town of Wausau. It really is a sliding scale based on the state assessment manual, and they hand out these tables of here's what you assess it for based on all these mathematical figures.
Yep.
And that's built in all mathematically, but then over time you might have revaluations where you start with that, but then the whole town sells for 10% more than what the state assessment manual has, so you add that to it also. But the key is always to make sure if our last reevaluation, say, was in 2012, which would be an old one now, then anything I assess, any detached garages, sun porches, it would be based on that same valuation process from that year.
Okay. So at the end of the year, what if they've been living at the house for 10 years, right?
Sure.
And at the end of the year, they get their tax bill and the fair market value went up, $15,000, but they didn't do anything. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. You haven't been contacted. No assessor, as far as they know, has came out. What likely happened there?
I got this exact question up multiple times this spring, so I'm glad you brought this up. At Open Book, someone came and said, actually, one came into board review too, saying, why did my assessment change so much? I didn't get a notice. What's going on? And I look through and I go, gosh, I haven't changed your assessment. Quick side note, when you get your tax bill at the end of the year, you get all these numbers on it, all these school districts, you have your local assessed value.
Yep.
That is the number that I do. That's the number all assessors will set for your town. Next to it underneath, there's an estimated fair market value. That is a number that changes year to year and is not controlled by your local assessor. That is a number that basically it works like this. The state of Wisconsin comes up with an equalized value for your municipality. They see all the sales that come in, and they analyze them. And if there's not enough sales, maybe in a small municipality, they'll look at a blend group of the area there, saying, "Hey, we're gonna, based on sales, we're gonna maybe move up this municipality's equalized value, say 4% or down 4%, in each of these classifications." And then that number will be compared against the total assessed value, which your local assessor does. So every year, I add up all the assessments. I go, here you go. Your township is this size. Here's how much local value you have here. And the equalized value that the state sets will be another number, which changes, which I'm not in control of. Now, the ratio between those two at the total level, at say just the residential land level, in some cases commercial level, whatever is a certain class, that gets looked at. And if that is too far apart, say more than 10%, then your municipality is out of compliance. Now, to circle back, when you get that bill and you see, gosh, my estimated fair market value has changed so much again this year, what's going on?
Yep.
That really is the average value of things over the town. So if the ratio between the total equalized that the state sets in your town versus the local, say it's a 10% difference. Say I'm 90% of what the state equalized value is, then that's the whole thing for the town. It's the average for the town. Then they will take your local piece and say, divide that local assessment by 0.9, and now that's your estimated fair market value, which over the years you've looked at and probably thought during a down year of like, I can't sell it for that. Who came up with that? And in boom years like this, they go, I can sell for far more than that estimated value. But it's really locked. It's really a reflection of the average ratio value of the town versus what the state equalized is.
Yep.
So that's a lot. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, and if you're too far, if what the state has versus the municipality has, if you're too far out of whack, then they might just adjust all of the values up a certain amount.
Well, that's exactly right. Every year we get a report from the state that says, hey, here's where we moved based on new construction and sales. New construction they just add in, but based on sales, they say economically we need to move this town up. Things are selling for more or less in your municipality. Over time, that moves away from maybe what the local assessment value is. We need, as a municipality, we need to be within 10% every year, or not every year, I'm sorry. We need to be within 10% once every 5 years of what that is. The state recognizes that you can't be at full market value every year because this year you're buying a house for $250 that I have $150 on. I'd have to move everyone up to make sure you hit $250 on that house, and the neighbor hits $250 who has an identical house. Well, Joe around the street, maybe he didn't bump up quite that much, so I got to find this average part. There's no way you could do that every town every year. The state recognized that, but they do say you need to be within 10% at least once every 5. So the first year that you fall out of it, and it doesn't have to be just things are selling too much. It could be the other way too. Things could be selling for too low. And then all of a sudden you fall out. So if you're within a range of your 90% of equalized or 110% of equalized, your town is considered compliant. But once you're outside that, it begins the ticking clock of, hey, you guys need to revalue this municipality or this class of land or anything else in there in order to get back in compliance. And if it's not done within 5 years, then the state will come in and do it. And they'll handle that, and they'll override the local assessment and do that process to make sure that they're all up. Because at the end of the day, they want to make sure there's not too much difference between all these municipalities. And not so much from a local standpoint, where if I locally, live in a town and my small portion of my tax bill goes to fix the roads, or if I live in a village or a city, maybe, fund the police or the fire department or whatever might be local. That's one thing. But when you get, like on the east side of the county, you've got the school districts of Wausau East, D.C. Everest, and partially Wittenberg. You've got all these municipalities that are sharing into that. They want to make sure, you don't have one assessor here assessing, just letting it go and saying, I'm just letting it go and being whatever value I want, but they're consistent. And the neighboring one is going, full value every year. So they look so funny. The idea of the equalize is they can cross between the two and figure out how to share that tax burden between two differing municipalities. And that's really the main use locally for equalized value in splitting up that budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
So City of Wausau, so that citywide reassessment, City
Sure.
of Wausau just had that.
Sure.
Rothschild just had theirs this year. I think
Yes.
Wausau's was last year. Rib Mountain was 2019.
Yes.
And a lot of times, so that's...
Those are big revaluations there, too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I live in the town of Rib Mountain, and I got my new fair market value and assessed value.
Yes.
And so one of the things I even thought, I was like, okay, wow, it raised, I think it was like 55, 60,000.
Yes.
And I was concerned because I was like, okay, well, I can do a quick ratio. If my taxes are X amount now and it went up, 60,000, I can just set up a quick ratio and figure out what my new tax bill would be. Yes. But I was surprised to know that my taxes only went up like $300.
Yes, that's a common thing, and locally we had, we've witnessed those three. With the sale prices going up, I think everywhere in Wisconsin is getting revalued. So anyone that's listening, no matter where you live, it's probably coming in the next 5 years if it hasn't already.
Yep.
But I know Greg, he does a great job over in the town of Rib Mountain. Here's the way it works when the assessments go up. That doesn't mean And the number one question we get is if they raise your assessment 30%, which is crazy high, but at the same time, that is what things are selling for these days, to be compliant. So if it goes up 30% or 20%, that does not mean that your tax bill is going up 20 or 30%. That's the number one question I get, because people are, they're working their budget for the year. What's this big bill going to be at the end of the year? But unless at the same time that the assessment comes through with a higher assessment, the town and the school district and NTC and the county all vote for an equal 30% budget increase, it can't increase that much. By just the rules of math. They're not allowed to raise that much outside of just what new construction is, unless there's a major referendum that comes through. So if your assessments go up, that doesn't mean that your bill goes up. That just means that's your piece of the pie. That's your percent of the town. If everyone's going up, then all boats rise. And when all boats rise, you're still getting roughly that same split of the bill. It's not always perfect. Sometimes residential's going up faster than commercial, or manufacturing is over or under assessed. So there's a little bit of burden shift. But for the most part, when you have a big assessment and things are going up $60,000 or 20 or 30%, a lot of times your tax bill is within a normal range of change almost when you get it and you're surprised by it. But that's probably the biggest question we get is how much is that going to change? Because that's the big check that people cut at the end of the year to support all their local municipalities and schools.
So let's talk about mill rates. So the way I've always thought about it is mill rate is for every $1,000 of assessed value, it's what you pay in tax.
Correct.
And mill rates vary from municipality.
They do.
City of Wausau has one of the highest.
They do.
In the area.
Yes.
And that's simply because, like you say, their budget, the way that the budget is split amongst the people is it's just
it is
more
different.
Expensive.
It is, and it needs to be, because for this reason, if you live in the city, typically you like to be closer to town. You want a police service that's close, a citywide police service. Yeah, you want a citywide fire department. There's all these different things that you have to qualify as a city. When you live out in the country and you live in a township, they're not required to have a full-time police department, so they may just work with Marathon County, or they may hire a part-time person or patrol car to come through. But they won't have a full-time fire department. They won't have a full-time employee as a mayor or as a clerk or something. They have everyone part-time. So when you live in the city, you have all these different services. You have water coming to your door, and you have a department of people that are trying to get good, clean water to all the people. There's a cost to that overhead and to stay certified as a city. And which is a requirement to have some of these things. And so just to pay for that, obviously you got to pass the hat a little bit more to fund that and keep good people and good jobs doing good work for the people to do that. But when you get out in the country more, yes, you do get a cheaper mill rate. But on the flip side, you really, if you have an emergency or you need police, you're going to have to wait a little bit for someone to come. If your septic system doesn't work, you don't call up your city waterworks and say, hey, I have a problem. You call someone and you may have to put in a $20,000 septic system, or you may have to pay for a new well that goes down 200, 300 feet to get it done. You are responsible for all that. So you take on the burden and the risk of that, and you get typically more privacy and quiet out in the country, and you pay less for that because you pay for that in other ways. But in the city, it does cost a little bit more in mill rates typically, but you also get more services that you get to take advantage of too. So there's kind of a shift in a balance between the two a little bit.
Okay, couple questions here. So
Sure.
one of the buzzwords or something that excites buyers and agents, right, is something. Do you assess Weston too, town of Weston, or
I
town of Wausau?
don't. I know who does. Greg Schmidt does that. He does a
Greg
great
does
job.
that too. Okay,
yeah. Years ago, my father worked with Greg and some of the Kurzweils, and all together, and they were at one point in the 80s, they were the largest private assessment firm in the state of Wisconsin.
Wow. Okay.
Over time, that changed as everyone kind of split off and started doing their own thing and managing their own thing. But But yes, I'm aware of very aware of the town of Weston, being on the east side of the county here and living in Rothschild.
Yeah, yeah. So even town of Wausau, like there's properties on Franklin Street
Yes.
that are practically right in the city.
Yes, they are.
But they have their own well and septics.
They do.
And they have high speed internet.
Yes.
And it's definitely a desirable place to be because you're so close to proximity of the city, yet you're town of Wausau, yet you have high speed internet, and it's just literally a half a minute to the city.
It is.
Yeah.
And if you studied out the sales in the town of Wausau, you will definitely see the proximity to the city definitely sells differently. As a realtor, you see it all the time.
Yep.
You'll see that the proximity of the town of Wausau definitely over time may sell differently. Especially lots of land that were farm field that wouldn't sell, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a nice new modern house now placed there, or the land sales will sell for. But when you get closer out to County J, or in the northwest part of the town of Wausau, or out in the Hewitt or Easton or Texas or somewhere, all of a sudden you'll see the sales just differ, and it's reflected a little bit in sale prices over time, and then eventually, and when I have enough data, when I do a revaluation, I go, okay, I may have to treat these neighborhoods or these parts of town with their land values a little bit different, just because they're selling different. They're worth that, and that way I'm kind of fair. And at the end of the day, you may adjust assessments during a revaluation, and then you sit down, you lay out all the sales next to them, and you go, okay, does this make sense? Am I too high or too low somewhere? But there's definitely pockets. You may have a spot out in the country that's 5 acres, and all of a sudden they split that off, and a subdeveloper comes out and makes 10 lots in there, and historically it was selling for $2,000 or $3,000 per acre for land in that town. But all of a sudden someone builds a nice house on one of these, and all the rest get nice houses, and they're suddenly paying $30,000 per lot. Well, that has to be treated differently over time, because that area is selling a little bit differently over time. And it doesn't mean everybody in the country is now worth $30,000, per acre or something. But that, little neighborhood with the cul-de-sac on, that is by the people. It's valued more, so it should be reflected a little bit when we're trying to split the tab up on how much should we pay for roads and who has to pay what. It's like, well, if that one sells for a little more, then we reflect that over time with revaluations in that way too.
Hypothetical question.
Yeah.
If in the town of Wausau, let's say
Sure.
that all of a sudden there was 40 homes
Sure.
that were all high class, 600,000 plus,
Sure.
we'll say,
Yes.
what would happen to the property taxes for that municipality? Would everyone then drop because you have all this new tax money coming in and the budget probably hasn't changed?
Now, on a year, say we had 10 houses that were built, $600,000 houses. So we have, $6 million we're adding to the local assessed roll, and I go through and I look at that and I go, yep, these should be valued at that number, and or whatever number it is, and equally across, we add $6 million to the roll. Now the town budget, they'll get that. Now, if they keep the same, lock that mill rate, then obviously everyone's property taxes would fall a little bit, because you now have that much more value that you're splitting the town up by. And they can do that. But they also now have likely a new cul-de-sac, a new road that they have to plow, that they have to take care of, that they, adopt and maintain. They have new, services that they may have to go out there and provide. And so a town is allowed to take that new construction and just roll that right in.
Yep.
And that way kind of keep their mill rate the same. If they said, we are locking this budget amount every year, period, well, then their mill rate would slowly fall every year as new construction comes in.
Yep.
And obviously the opposite, if a town was getting smaller, which does happen, but more rare these days. But they're allowed to increase that and follow along with that new construction if they choose, which does make sense, because if you got more roads to plow, snow plow trucks, and you need new blades, you need all these things, there's extra wear and tear in machinery, and everything else too. And the biggest cost locally to a town typically is roads. That's the biggest budget item they're constantly working around. So when there's more of that, you definitely want to try and get a little bit at the same time, without
build up the reserves.
Build up the reserves, because there's always a big cost coming somewhere. There's a bridge, there's something, and they work hard to really make a dollar go a long way for people.
Okay, Kurt, here's a question for you. So you're a homeowner. I'm a homeowner.
Yes.
For the homeowners out there, if they want to keep their, if they want to keep the assessor,
Sure.
How do you keep your taxes down? What tips? What to do? What not to do?
Sure. Well, that's fair. I would say this: if you're thinking of changing your property or building something, you're like, gosh, how bad is that going to be? How big a bill is that going to be? If you have questions and you're going to build something, attachment, addition, another garage, call your assessor. Just ask them. Say, hey, I'm thinking of doing something, or I'm thinking of doing something. Is there anything that I could do to potentially, not get hit so much, or
just don't give them your address or your name and call from a.
That's right. Yeah.
Call from a phone booth.
Yeah, this is John Doe, and I have a question about a property. Yeah, exactly.
You definitely get those calls, don't you?
I
definitely get the people that don't want, like, it's an unknown. It's an unknown number, and they won't tell you, like.
Oh yes.
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 Sure. Yeah,
you name it.
I get that too.
I get calls through people and saying, okay, I have some. I don't want to say where I live.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're gonna come and peek in my backyard.
Yeah.
The assessor's not the peeping Tom trying to look around for everything. Really, it's there are times that there's an advantage to calling. Especially if I've had people call that have woods and they go, gosh, the price of woods is this or that, or it's selling for more these days. Is there something I could do? And sometimes there is. There's some people aren't aware of the DNR's managed forest law program.
Yep.
And it's not for everyone. Some people don't like it, but some people really enjoy it because they get the use of the woods. They enjoy the woods, and all of a sudden they can get a break a little bit on that by joining and following that program. Now there's pluses and minuses to things like that, and there's also different things where people sometimes tap maple syrup on their woods, or they have a piece of land like, hey, I've been renting out these 4 acres on my 10-acre piece to a local farmer. You should let your assessor know that, because that qualifies as an ag use, and it can be a benefit to you. And so, there's all different things and thoughts, along that a little bit. I would say understand what you have, understand what your file looks like a little bit, and the only way you can do that is have a little bit of communication. But at the end of the day, understand that your assessor's trying to, a good assessor's trying to make sure it's uniform and fair with all your neighbors. And that's the bottom line of that, and most people understand that. And there's probably always one or two that don't like it no matter what, or don't like the idea of taxes. And I understand that and respect the opinion. But at the end of the day, the towns have a job to do to fairly put these burdens out there a little bit and get these budgets going and take care of a town. But I would say the biggest thing you can do is probably take a look at that and understand what's on your card a little bit.
Sure. Any as we wrap up here, any funny stories or any laughable moments in your job as of late?
I don't know. This year I've been rephotographing. I'm prepping for revaluations in a couple towns, so I've been going door to door, rephotographing every building in a few towns just to make sure there's nothing missing. You going out and talking to people, you get all kinds of people. I've gotten out of the car and been greeted happily, and I have heard more negative things right away. But I would say, like, it's an enjoyable job. 99% of people are awesome and understand you got a job to do and are happy to meet you and happy to know there's a local person kind of coming out and taking care of them and thinking about it a little bit and trying to do the best by them, and they understand that it's being consistent. But yeah, so it really is kind of a nice job. It's nice to be outdoors a lot too.
Yeah.
But over time you get all kinds of stories. Some are more shareable than others.
Yeah.
For sure. I've had calls from neighbors saying, make sure that you go over and check out so and so's cabin in the woods that may or may not be there, and so it's really nice sometimes though. But it's meeting the people and kind of getting out and working with the people is the best part of this job, and kind of learning the history of some of these towns and the people who live their lives there and taking care of it for a long time. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great, Kurt. Thank you for joining us on The Reel. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time this morning and sharing some knowledge with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me in. I hope I helped enlighten people on the process, the system of assessing the state of Wisconsin, and feel free to reach out if there's questions in the future.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.